Hi, welcome to the TC. My name's David, and today we're going to be taking a look at the iPhone 12 Pro Max in 2023. How does it hold up in a long-term review? So I've been actually daily driving the iPhone 12 Pro Max since 2021. So I've gotten a pretty good idea of how the iPhone 12 Pro Max has held up over the past, 2 years, I'd say. Now, actually, that isn't my daily driver now, as of about 2 days ago, but I still have a good idea of what the iPhone 12 Pro Max was like to use and own. So hopefully this review helps you guys out to know how the iPhone 12 Pro Max has held up today. So the iPhone 12 series was originally released in October of 2020, but the iPhone 12 Pro Max wouldn't be released for sale until November of the same year. The iPhone 12 series actually brought back the flat edge designs that we saw back with the iPhone 5S last. As of right now, the iPhone 12 series, 13 and 14 all have flat sides, so it can be kind of hard to tell them apart if you're just looking at them. The sides of the iPhone 12 Pro Max are a polished stainless steel, unlike the regular iPhone 12, which is just an aluminum. What this means though is that it does have a pretty premium build. The back of the iPhone is made of glass, but it is a frosted glass, where the regular iPhone 12 uses a kind of glossy glass. The camera lens is where the glass is actually glossy, and again, with the iPhone 12, it's reverse. The camera lens on that phone is a matte texture. The flat design of the iPhone 12 allowed for the iPhone 12 series to have 35% thinner bezels over the 11, which is a pretty significant amount. And what this meant is that the screen size of the iPhone 11 Pro Max actually increased from the 11 Pro Max. And it was like 6.5 inches on the 11 Pro Max to 6.7 inches on the iPhone 12 Pro Max. So it is a very slight increase, but it is an increase nonetheless. Now, with that increase also came a bigger phone itself. Because we did have the flat sides, it did mean that the phone kind of flattened and got a little bit wider and a little bit taller. So that does mean that this phone is kind of hard to use one-handed. Unless you've got pretty big hands, it is a little bit of a hassle to hold with one hand. Now, luckily, even though it is a bit hard to hold, it does have Apple's strongest glass. This was the first year that Apple introduced ceramic shield, which is a glass kind of mixture between ceramic crystals and the actual glass crystals. So it does have a stronger glass on the front screen. This does not apply to the back of the phone though, which is kind of funny to me because that's a lot of people's problems when they drop their phone. It ends up cracking the back too. But at least you know that the front is covered. The iPhone 12 Pro series came in 4 colors, the 4 colors being graphite, silver, gold, and the Pacific blue, which is the marketing color that the Apple used, and it's the color I have here. It's a really, really nice deep blue color that has this really awesome shine when you put it in the light. I really like this color, and I think it's actually one of my favorite iPhone colors ever released. It's a shame that these promotional kind of marketing colors never come back later on, unless it's one of the more regular colors such as the graphite or silver and gold. One of the pro features that the iPhone 12 Pro Max actually had over even the regular iPhone 12 Pro is the introduction of sensor shift stabilization. Now, what this means is that the actual sensor itself is able to move and stabilize video, where the older iPhones typically use OIS, which is optical image stabilization. That meant that the lenses itself move, but not the sensor. In-body stabilization is something that really high-end cameras actually have. So it's really cool to see Apple doing sensor shift stabilization on their cameras. I do wonder that if in the future, maybe Apple will be implementing sensor shift in all of their camera sensors. But as of right now, and with the iPhone 12 Pro Max, the sensor shift sensor is only on the main camera. Now, with that main camera, the iPhone 12 Pro Max actually has a larger sensor as well over the iPhone 12 Pro. So it is 47% larger than the iPhone 12 Pro sensor, which means it's able to bring in a lot more light. Along with the larger sensor, it also has an aperture of f1.6, which means it's pretty wide and it lets in a lot more light as a result. Having the sensor shift and the bigger sensor and the wider aperture all means that night photos on the iPhone 12 Pro Max are a lot better than what you could get on the iPhone 11 Pro Max or the iPhone 11 Pro. Now, that being said, I mean, it's not perfect, but you can't really expect something perfect out of something that's being able to be held in your hand and put in your pocket. I mean, it's a phone still, after all. But it is still pretty good, and it does the job really well. Now, with the iPhone 12 Pro and the Pro Max, they also introduced something called ProRAW. Now, if you have used a regular camera or DSLR, you know that the RAW camera format allows you to take photos uncompressed. So basically, when you're taking a photo with your phone, you're either taking them usually as a JPEG or a other compressed file type like HEIF. So what RAW does is it lets you take the photo as the sensor sees it itself. There's no post compression or anything like that. So with ProRAW, you're taking the full photo. There's no compression. There's no trying to make the photo smaller, essentially. And what this means is that you have a lot more data to work with when you're editing their photos. Now, this also means that the photos themselves are much, much larger. So if you are taking ProRAW photos, you're probably going to want to have a lot of storage. Now, that being said, though, ProRAW photos are really great when you're using them on the iPhone 12 Pro and Pro Max. Because you're getting such a large photo, you have so much potential for editing your photos. I noticed that when I take a ProRAW photo, there's so much more detail when I up the shadows and lower the highlights in the photo. I'll include some examples in the video too, so you guys can see what I'm actually talking about. The iPhone 12 Pro also introduced the LiDAR sensor on the camera lens. So what the LiDAR sensor does is that it allows for more augmented reality effects to be implemented more accurately, because what a LiDAR sensor does is basically like a laser, and that laser is shooting out light, and it's measuring how far the distance is from the light that's being shot out from the LiDAR sensor to hit back onto the LiDAR sensor. So basically it shoots out light, it hits the surface, and it reflects back. And then the phone is able to say, oh, okay, that's only like 3 feet away or 5 feet away. And what this also does is not just allow for better AR experiences, but with the camera, it allows you to take night mode, portrait mode. And having night mode, portrait mode on the main sensor is really great, especially when you're in darker conditions. I know that on the 11 Pro Max and the 11 Pro, which I had before, the night mode only works if you're taking regular photos, so you can't use it with portrait mode, which is a bummer because having portrait mode with night mode is really great, especially when you're in a situation where there's a lot of like little lights behind and you get the nice bokeh balls. So yeah, having night mode portraits is really nice to have. Another thing that the iPhone 12 Pro Max had over the 12 Pro is a farther reaching telephoto lens. What this meant is that the telephoto lens on the iPhone 12 Pro Max was a 65mm equivalent, whereas before it was only about 50mm. So this meant that you had an option to go to 2.5x magnification instead of just 2. I think this is the only iPhone that actually had a 2.5x magnification lens. I know that the 14 Pro has the ability to do 2x and 3x, but the 2.5x is limited only to the iPhone 12 Pro Max. Now, with that magnification also came at the cost of a lower aperture. So unfortunately, it doesn't let in as much light, but you are able to see farther. But as a result, if you're in a darker environment, the phone will automatically switch to the main camera lens. So you do kind of lose the ability to have a nice and clear shot with the telephoto lens because it's not able to capture as much light, but you are able to go farther. So it's a trade-off you have to consider. The iPhone 12 series was actually also the first phones in the world to be able to record in Dolby Vision HDR. Now, Dolby Vision HDR is a format that allows you to take video in 10-bit color versus 8-bit color. That means that there's a lot more color and a lot more editing ability with the footage that you're able to take. And also, now that footage is all in complete HDR, that means that editing the footage can be a little bit tricky, especially if you don't have the equipment to properly view HDR. So a lot of my videos are actually edited on my iPad Pro. So that screen that I have on my 2018 Pro isn't able to actually give me the full range of HDR. But I have a screen here, my monitor, that does support HDR. So I have to like reference that in order to see what the video actually looks like. So it is a bit tricky with Dolby Vision HDR. And I know that there's a lot of like controversy when it first came out because a lot of the social media apps weren't posting correctly. They would be like way oversaturated sometimes, or they wouldn't properly look the way that they're supposed to, or they wouldn't look natural. So I know that it is a bit tricky, but I think most of it has been sorted out now, so that shouldn't be something too much to worry about, especially if you're just looking at videos on your phone and sharing it on social media. That shouldn't be an issue. As you know too, I use an iPhone whenever I'm making my videos, so yeah, I mean, the iPhone has some of the best video quality I've ever used on any device. I mean, it rivals a lot of cameras even. So honestly, video quality has never really been an issue on the iPhone, and it's not an issue on the 12 Pro Max either. Now, the iPhone 12 series was actually the first iPhone to have 5G connection. And I think 5G connection, when it first came out especially, was very, very underwhelming and way overhyped. And in a lot of ways, it still is, especially in the US. 5G is basically LTE, but a little bit faster, unless you're in a city. Now, the iPhone also supports millimeter wave in the US, and that means that you're able to get much, much, much faster speeds in specific locations. So, for instance, in the city, I'm able to get speeds that are almost as quick as Wi-Fi or even sometimes faster, but it's very limited spots. And I think that's something that they really need to improve on still with 5G, especially in the US. Now, I've used T-Mobile, so we have ultra capacity 5G, which is basically like their millimeter wave equivalent. And in the city, if you're like directly next to or really close to the millimeter wave antennas, yeah, you'll get really fast speeds. But the moment you're away from them, regular 5G is just okay. I mean, it's 5G, which is technically better than 4G, but honestly, 1 to 2 seconds faster to load a web page isn't that big of a deal. I think what it allows for mostly is just having that future proofing on your phone. But yeah, 5G has definitely been something that's kind of underwhelming to me. Now, also keep in mind that 5G does eat the battery quite a bit, so your phone will honestly switch back to LTE sometimes just to save battery when you're not really using anything that uses a lot of data. On the hardware side of things, the iPhone 12 Pro Max, God, it's such a long name. It uses the Apple A14 Bionic chipset with 6 gigabytes of RAM. Now, this means that the iPhone 12, oh my goodness, there's so many different names here. The iPhone 12 Pro Max does have a very fast processor and GPU, and I don't think that's going to be an issue anytime soon. The A14 is honestly really, really zippy. I mean, I think they use it on the iPad Air 4 too. So yeah, I mean, it's not a bad chip whatsoever. I think you're not going to have any issues coming up with that phone or that chipset anytime in the future, unless it's like 5 years down the line, you know, in the last software updates. But right now, the iPhone 12 Pro Max is as zippy as it was on 2021 when I got it. So that's definitely not an issue if you're worried about that. Now, for charging the iPhone 12 Pro Max and battery life, the battery life does take a hit from the iPhone 11 Pro Max, and that's because it does have a smaller battery. Now, if you consider a smaller battery with a larger screen, yeah, the battery life isn't going to be as good as the 11 Pro Max. And I think that's somewhere where Apple kind of dropped the ball. The battery life definitely could be a lot better. Now, that being said, there's new charging capabilities with the iPhone 12 series, of course. If you remember, MagSafe came out with the iPhone 12 series, and essentially it's like a magnetic connection that allows you to charge the phone just by aligning it with the magnets on the back of your phone and back of your case. Now, with MagSafe, it allows up to 15 watts of charging, which isn't as much as like the normal fast charging. I believe the normal fast charging for the 12 Pro Max is 20 watts, but it's still fast enough in my opinion. And not having to worry about, you know, plugging it in physically is kind of nice. I do have like a MagSafe charger here too, so it does make it convenient when you're just wanting to like plop down the phone and put it on the charger. The MagSafe accessories also are kind of nice. I know that they make tripods and like mounts for the MagSafe compatible kind of like car mounts or tripod mounts and stuff like that. So it's kind of nice that there's a market for these things. So it's gonna be interesting to see where that goes in the future as well. One thing to keep in mind if you are having an older iPhone 12 Pro Max or any older iPhone, and if you're buying used, is also keeping an eye on battery health. The battery health on my 12 Pro Max is at 88%, and it's been at 88% for the past like year and a half. So that hasn't really been an issue for me, but there is issues with the software itself. I don't know if anyone else has been experiencing this, but with my 12 Pro Max, sometimes I will notice like an extreme drainage with the battery once it reaches below 50%. And I think it's a software thing because sometimes it doesn't happen at all. Sometimes it lasts forever. So sometimes though it will reach under 50% and all of a sudden it would just be like the next 5 minutes all the way down to 30%. So definitely keep an eye out on battery health and also consider the software that the iPhone is running. Hopefully it's just a bug for now, but maybe stick to an older iOS version if that is something that worries you. Another thing to keep in mind too is that my iPhone 12 Pro Max is actually an original model from November of 2020. So it's never had a battery change. And I think that also could contribute to the weird degradation. So if that's something that you're looking at and purchasing an iPhone 12 Pro Max used, definitely look at battery health and consider getting the battery replaced if it's below 80%. Now, also, I wanted to say that the iPhone 12 Pro Max has actually been really good to me. I haven't really had any major issues other than the weird battery discharge issue, but I think that is software. So other than that though, I've been really happy to use the iPhone 12 Pro Max and it's been a very reliable daily driver for me. I haven't really had any issues like I did with the 11 Pro Max. I actually had my 11 Pro Max replaced in November, I believe, of 2021, and it was because of a cellular issue where it would just randomly drop calls. So that's saying something where the iPhone 12 Pro Max, even though it's like a 3-year-old phone now, I've never had to have it replaced or anything like that. So I think it's been one of the most reliable iPhones I've ever used, actually. And I mean, sure, it doesn't have all the nice newer features that the newer iPhones have, like the 120 hertz ProMotion screens or the 48 megapixel cameras and, you know, using ProRes for video. But honestly, most people don't care about that. And I think it's okay to not care about that because the iPhone 12 Pro Max is still a great phone today. If you're using one, I don't think you really need to upgrade. I mean, it's basically like the newer iPhone still. And even if it has the full-size notch, it's not a big deal. Honestly, even if you have like a 13 or 14 with the regular like smaller notch cutout, it doesn't really make a huge difference. I mean, it's just a smaller notch. So yeah, I mean, you're probably not going to notice a huge difference with that. I mean, 120 hertz screens are nice, but you can live with 60 hertz. It's fine, especially with how smooth iOS usually is. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you guys own an iPhone 12 Pro Max or if you're looking for one, tell me your guys' thoughts below. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I'll try to my best to answer all of them. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And if you did enjoy it, please consider leaving a like below and subscribing for more content just like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.